away from that truck. That is not your vehicle.
Sir, lower your voice.
My wife already called the cops. You are not going anywhere.
This is my truck. Step back.
People like you don't drive trucks like this.
I'm a federal agent, and you're about to regret this.
The prescription was the reason she was there. Blood pressure medication, 30-day supply, first Saturday of every month, same pharmacy, same parking lot, same spot in Section C. She had been doing this exact errand at this exact location for 2 years without a single incident. 11 minutes, park, walk in, wait at the counter, walk out. Simple, routine. The kind of errand a body does on its own because it has been done enough times. She parked at 1:34 p.m. She was back at her truck by 1:45. The prescription was in her hand. The driver's side door was open. She placed it on the passenger seat, closed the door, and turned around. Joseph Watson was already 3 feet from her face. He had covered 40 feet of parking lot asphalt in the time it took her to put a paper bag on a seat and close a door. But already yelling before he reached her, already certain, already past the point where a question could have stopped any of what was about to happen. Joseph Watson had not come across that parking lot to ask a question. He had come because his wife looked up from 40 feet away, watched a black woman walk toward an expensive truck, and made a decision in 3 seconds that would cost them everything. $1.4 million, 2 businesses, 1 marriage, 1 house, a decade of monthly payments. All of it traces back to 3 seconds and one assumption that Sandra Watson never once stopped to question. But before we get to the ruin, we need to go back to the truck, because the truck is where the story actually starts. Not in the parking lot, not on the day Sandra Watson looked up, years before that. And in a different parking lot entirely, when Helen Montes walked out of a dealership in Phoenix with keys in her hand and a feeling she had been working toward for 18 months. Drop your answer in the comments right now. If a couple blocked access to your own car and called the cops on you, what would you do? And tell me where you are watching from. Because what Helen did next is the reason the Watsons are still making payments on a debt they will carry for the next decade. She had saved for 18 months, not because she could not afford it sooner, because she wanted to pay cash. She had watched her father do the same thing. Her father, a mechanic in Tucson who built his own four-lift shop from a single-bay garage, who believed that owning something completely meant something different than owning something almost completely. But he had passed that belief to her along with his work ethic and his refusal to accept that the distance between where you started and where you wanted to be was anyone else's problem to close. Helen had closed the distance herself. Every time. She bought the black Ford Raptor in August, paid cash, drove it off the lot on a Tuesday afternoon, and sat in the dealership parking lot for 3 full minutes before starting the engine. Not because anything was wrong, because she wanted to sit in it and understand that it was hers, completely. No payments, no lender, no asterisk. It was the most expensive personal purchase she had ever made. It was also the most deliberate. She had been a senior special agent in the FBI's Phoenix field office for 14 years. Violent Crimes Division. She supervised a team of 6 agents. And around Starnia and Barnier she had led 23 federal investigations. She had testified in federal court 14 times. She had a director's commendation for a cross-state trafficking operation that ended with 41 arrests across 4 jurisdictions. She had spent 14 years walking into rooms where people underestimated her and leaving those rooms having done exactly what she came to do. The truck was not a status symbol. It was a statement she made to herself every time she got into it. I earned this. It is mine. Anyone who thinks otherwise is about to be corrected. On the Saturday in October when she parked that truck in spot C17 at Silverstone Plaza and walked into the pharmacy, she had been awake since 5 a.m. case files for a Monday briefing, a morning run at 7, a call to her mother at 10. The ordinary maintenance of a life built around extraordinary work. She had no idea that 2 people she had never met were in the same parking lot. She had no idea one of them was already watching her. Joan Thomas finished her grocery run at 1:43 p.m., 34 years old, nurse, 9 years on the floor of a Phoenix hospital, 12-hour shifts that had trained her to read situations quickly and accurately because in her line of work, a misread situation cost someone their life. She had parked in spot C15, 2 spaces from Helen's Raptor, and was loading her bags when she heard the yelling start. She turned around, a large white man closing the distance between himself and a black woman standing beside a truck. The woman's hands at her sides, visible, still, not moving, the man's finger pointing. I feared the words carrying clearly across the parking lot. Joan recognized what she was watching before Joseph Watson had finished his second sentence. She put her grocery bags down. She pulled out her phone. She pressed record. She did not announce herself. She did not intervene. She did not lower the phone once in the next 9 minutes. She understood. The way anyone who has seen enough understands that the most useful thing she could do in that moment was document it accurately and completely and not let anything move the camera. Helen did not know Joan was recording. She did not know anyone was recording. She was standing in a parking lot with a man screaming at her, and she was doing the only thing 14 years of training had built into her body for situations designed to destabilize her. She stayed still. She stayed visible. Once she waited. 20 feet away, Herta Bennett, 67 years old, retired teacher, 30 years of paying attention for a living, had stopped walking to her car. She stood between two parked vehicles partially out of Joseph's sightline. Close enough to hear every word. She committed every word to memory the way someone does when they have spent 30 years holding people accountable for exactly what they said. Two witnesses, neither known to Helen, neither asked, both deciding independently that what they were watching required documentation. 40 feet away, Sandra Watson stood with her phone to her ear watching her husband yell at a woman who had not moved. She had made the call. She had set this in motion. And now she was watching it unfold with the composed certainty of someone who has decided they are right before the evidence has arrived, and has not yet considered what happens when the evidence says otherwise. The evidence was 2 minutes and 14 seconds away. Joseph Watson yelled for 47 seconds before Helen said her first word. 47 seconds of get away from that truck, and that is not your vehicle, and the police are coming, and people like you do not drive trucks like this. 47 seconds of a large man using his size and his volume to accomplish what he had already decided before he crossed that parking lot. Helen let him finish. Then she said, "Sir, lower your voice." He did not lower his voice. She said, "This is my truck, step back." He did not step back. He said, "People like you don't drive trucks like this." Those 6 words, the ones that slipped out before he thought about what they revealed, the ones Joan's phone captured in perfect audio clarity at 1:47 p.m., landed on that parking lot like a sentence that had been written before the confrontation began. People like you. Not people who steal. Not people who had done anything observable or specific. People like you. Helen looked at him for one full beat of silence. Then she said quietly, directly, without raising her voice by a single register, "I'm a federal agent, and you are about to regret this." Joseph's finger dropped. He had been pointing at her for 47 seconds, and his finger dropped in less than one. He looked at her. Really looked. The way people look when a situation they thought they understood has just revealed itself to be something else entirely. The stillness he had read as submission now had to be reinterpreted as something he did not have a category for. His mouth closed. He glanced back at Sandra. Sandra lowered her phone slowly. She was still connected to 911. The dispatcher was still asking questions. Sandra was no longer answering them. Neither of them spoke. The parking lot was quiet except for Joan Thomas keeping her phone perfectly steady 2 spaces away. Terry Smith pulled into Silverstone Plaza at 1:49 p.m. 8 years with Phoenix PD. He had worked 3 districts, and he had learned to read dispatch descriptions the way experienced officers do, not as facts, but as the beginning of an assessment to be completed on scene. The description had said, "Black female, possible vehicle theft, complainant on scene." He pulled into Section C and completed his assessment in 4 seconds. A black woman in a yellow blazer standing directly against a black Ford Raptor. Both hands visible. Expression neutral, not moving. No signs of flight, no signs of aggression, no signs of anything except someone waiting for something to be resolved. A large white man 3 feet from her. Volume reduced, posture still forward. A white woman 10 feet back, phone lowered, watching. 2 bystanders, one still filming. Smith parked, got out, walked toward Helen. He said, "Ma'am, can you tell me what's happening here?" Helen said, "Officer, I'm Senior Special Agent Helen Montes, FBI Phoenix Field Office, badge number 4912. This is my personal vehicle. A 2023 Ford Raptor registered in my name, purchased in August. And these 2 individuals blocked my access and called 911 based on no observable criminal behavior. There is a witness with footage of the entire incident." Smith said, "Can I see your credentials?" Helen produced them. Badge and ID handed them without being asked twice. Smith looked at the credentials, looked at the truck, walked back to his patrol car and ran the plate. 40 seconds. 2023 Ford Raptor. Registered to Helen Louise Montes, Phoenix, Arizona. Active registration. No flags, no warrants, no holds. He got out, walked back, handed her credentials back. He said, "Agent Montes, I apologize for the delay." Then he turned to the Watsons. Something had shifted in the way he was looking at them. The particular shift that happens when a situation reveals itself and the people who created it are still standing there in the middle of it. He said, "Sir, can you explain to me why you called 911? Joseph said, "We saw her near this truck and she didn't look like she—" He stopped. Smith waited. Joseph said, "We thought she was stealing it." Smith said, "Based on what?" No answer. Smith said, "Did you observe her break into the vehicle?" Joseph said, "No, but—" Smith said, "Did you observe her damage the vehicle?" Joseph, "No." Smith, "Did she present any behavior indicating she was attempting to steal the vehicle?" Silence. Mark Shirley arrived 2 minutes into this exchange. Sergeant, 15 years. He took one look at the scene, walked to Smith, looked at Helen's credentials, and said, "Agent Montes, I'm Sergeant Shirley. I want to personally apologize for this situation." Helen said, "I need the incident report to reflect exactly what happened. The false 911 call, like the unlawful detention attempt and the language used, all of it documented completely." Shirley said, "It will be." Joan Thomas lowered her phone for the first time in 9 minutes. She had footage of all of it. Helen did not know that footage existed yet. She would find out at 6:47 p.m., 5 hours later, when a notification appeared on her phone showing that a video titled "Man Screams at Black Woman in Parking Lot for Being Near Her Own Truck." She's FBI had been shared to her by 3 separate people who did not know each other. She watched it once, put her phone down, picked it up, watched it again. Then she called Dylan Oakley. Joan had uploaded the footage at 2:31 p.m. She had not planned to post it publicly. She had intended to offer it to Helen directly, but Helen had left the parking lot before Joan could approach her. So Joan sat in her car for 11 minutes looking at 9 minutes of footage and made a decision. She posted it. Within 90 minutes, the video had 200,000 views. By the time Joan finished her hospital shift that evening, it had crossed 1 million. By midnight, it had cleared 3 million, and the names Joseph and Sandra Watson had been identified, verified against public records, and were appearing in news alerts across Arizona. Sandra Watson's interior design business was found within 4 hours. By Sunday morning, the Google reviews had dropped from 4.7 stars to 1.9. By Monday afternoon, 3 clients had canceled active projects. A 4th sent an email. A 5th simply stopped responding entirely. Joseph Watson's contracting company had its LinkedIn page found by Sunday evening. His largest commercial client, a property development firm accounting for 30% of Watson Construction Group's annual revenue, called Monday morning. The call lasted 4 minutes. The $680,000 contract was suspended pending review. It was never reinstated. By the end of the week, Watson Construction Group had lost 42% of its active revenue in 6 days, from 9 minutes of parking lot footage. Helen took 4 days of personal leave, not because she was shaken, but because John Manley asked her to. The Bureau preferred its agents not to be the center of viral coverage while working active federal cases. She used the 4 days to write a complete incident report. Every timestamp, every word she could recall, every action and its basis. She submitted it Monday morning and called Dylan Oakley that afternoon. Dylan Oakley filed the federal lawsuit 5 weeks after the incident. 41 pages, Joseph Watson and Sandra Watson named individually. 4 causes of action: unlawful detention, racial discrimination, false report, abuse of civil process. The Watsons' attorney called within 48 hours. Dylan described the call as the shortest productive conversation he had in 18 years. The attorney said, "What does she want?" Dylan said, "Read the complaint." The attorney said, "Give me a number." Dylan said, "I'll give you one in the deposition." The deposition of Joseph Watson lasted 6 hours and 11 minutes. Dylan did not begin with the parking lot. He began with the contracting business, revenue, workforce demographics, prior complaints of discriminatory conduct. He spent 40 minutes on the Watsons' neighborhood, HOA minutes, next door activity, prior 911 calls from their address, the number of those calls that had resulted in any finding of actual criminal activity, 0. Then Dylan placed Joan's footage on the screen, full volume. 6 hours and 11 minutes into a deposition, and Joseph Watson sat in a conference room and watched himself yelling at a woman who never moved, never raised her voice, never did anything except stand beside her own truck. Dylan paused at the 6 words. "People like you don't drive trucks like this." He asked Joseph to explain what he meant by people like you. Joseph said he meant people who appeared to be in the wrong location. Dylan asked him to define wrong location. Joseph said people who did not appear to belong near an expensive vehicle. Dylan asked how he determined who belonged near an expensive vehicle. Silence. And Dylan placed Helen's employment record on the table. 14 years, 23 investigations, director's commendation, the vehicle purchase receipt, cash, August, Helen's name. The pharmacy receipt, timestamped 1:38 p.m., 11 minutes before the confrontation. He said, "Mr. Watson, your wife called 911. You crossed 40 feet of parking lot and yelled at a woman for 47 seconds. You told her people like her did not drive trucks like hers. And the basis for all of that was a black woman walking toward a vehicle she had purchased with cash 7 weeks earlier. He closed his folder. He said, "I have no further questions." The Watsons' attorney requested a settlement meeting 3 days later. The settlement was reached 12 weeks after the lawsuit was filed. $1,400,000. Structured across both defendants individually. Both business entities exposed, both contributing to the figure. 3 non-financial terms attached. First, Joseph Watson required to complete 40 hours of documented implicit bias training within 90 days. Second, Sandra Watson required to issue a formal written apology published in the Arizona Republic acknowledging that her 911 call had been made without factual basis and had been motivated by racial assumption. Not a social media post, a newspaper, a permanent public record. Her attorney fought that term harder than any financial element. Dillon did not move. The statement ran on a Thursday morning. Third, neither party could file any legal action against Joan Thomas, Herta Bennett, or any witness who had provided statements in the case. Helen distributed the settlement through 3 channels: $400,000 to the Arizona ACLU, specifically to fund legal representation for individuals subjected to racially motivated 911 calls who could not afford private counsel. Because the only reason Helen had Dillon Oakley's number was 14 years of professional credibility. The next person this happened to might not have that. $350,000 to a nonprofit providing free dashcam and security camera installation for black professionals across Maricopa County. Documentation as protection. Distributed to the people who needed it most. $250,000 to establish a scholarship at Arizona State University's law school for students specializing in civil rights litigation. Her written statement distributing the settlement ended with one sentence: "The next person this happens to may not have credentials. That is the point." Watson Construction Group lost 4 clients in 6 months. The $680,000 contract was formally terminated in December. Joseph sold the business the following year, at a loss his accountant described as significant. Sandra closed Watson Interiors 14 months after the incident. She now works as a salaried consultant for a single firm. Her name is not on the door. The house in Arcadia, purchased at $890,000, listed at $1,100,000, sat for 63 days. Accepted $980,000. After mortgage payoff, closing costs, and the initial settlement payment, they cleared considerably less than planned. The monthly payments continue. Joseph completed the 40 hours of implicit bias training. Yes, his certificate is on file with Dillon Oakley's office. Dillon has not heard from him since. Sandra's written apology ran in the Arizona Republic on a Thursday. Helen read it at her kitchen table with coffee before leaving for work. Once, set the paper down, finished her coffee, picked up her keys. She went to work. Joan Thomas still has the footage on her phone. She has been asked 3 times whether she regrets posting it. She gives the same answer every time. She says, "I regret that it needed to be posted. I do not regret posting it." Herta Bennett's written statement, 4 pages, single-spaced, every word she heard from 12 feet away, is part of the permanent federal court record. Dillon told her it was the most detailed bystander statement he had received in 18 years. She said she was a teacher for 30 years. Paying attention was the job. Helen Montes is still at the Phoenix field office. Promoted to supervisory special agent 9 months after the incident. Still drives the black Ford Raptor. Still parks at Silverstone Plaza on the first Saturday of every month. She has a dash cam now, front and rear. Continuous recording, automatic upload. She installed it the Monday after the incident. Not because she was afraid, because she understood, had always understood, that the difference between accountability and silence was almost always documentation. She had the credentials to prove what happened in that parking lot. Most people do not. That is the only reason she got the apology in the newspaper and the check in the mail. And she knows it. 3 seconds. That is how long it took Sandra Watson to look up from 40 feet away. Watch a black woman walk toward a truck and decide she did not belong there. 3 seconds. No conversation. No question. No pause to consider whether the assumption was correct. Just 3 seconds and a phone call and 40 feet of parking lot and 47 seconds of yelling and 6 words that landed on camera and in court records and in a federal settlement and in a newspaper apology that Sandra Watson's attorney fought harder than any dollar amount to prevent. The truck cost Helen 18 months of savings. The assumption cost the Watsons $1.4 million. 2 businesses, 1 marriage, and a decade of payments. Both of those things are true at the same time. And the distance between them, between 18 months of deliberate saving and 3 seconds of unconsidered assumption, is where this entire story lives. Helen went back to work the Monday after the incident. She went back to the parking lot the following Saturday, parked in the same spot, walked into the same pharmacy, picked up the same prescription. She turned around, walked back to her truck, put the paper bag on the passenger seat, closed the door, and drove home. The way she always had. The way she always should have been able to. If this story stayed with you, share it. Not because of the settlement, not because of the credentials, but because Joan Thomas almost did not record it. Almost thought it was not her place. She pressed record anyway, and 9 minutes became 41 pages, became a federal lawsuit, became $1.4 million, became a newspaper apology, became dash cams in the hands of people who needed them. Document everything. Know what you are entitled to. And never let anyone tell you that you do not belong in a space you have every right to occupy. Subscribe for more cases like this one. Drop your location in the comments, because Sandra Watson's 3-second assumption happens everywhere, every day, in parking lots across every state you can name, everywhere.